I'm Declan Hooper, and welcome to this Wickets and Pickets Ashes selection show ahead of the second test from the Adelaide Oval. Here with me today, I have Tushar Buhl, all the way from India. How are you doing today, Tushar?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. Exciting times. Did we see what was, I suppose, an exciting but very one-sided first test, hey?
I wouldn't say it was one-sided. I would say England just didn't make the most of their chances. I think if they had just given Australia a bit of a scare, taken a bit more of their chances, they could have made more of a contest. I think Australia got the comprehensive win in the end, and now they're full of confidence going into the second one.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least this Australian's full of confidence, I suppose. First of all, I want to catch up with you, I suppose, because you've been doing obviously the match reports and some work around the Ashes. Um, looking back, obviously, on the first test and the selection, do we think ultimately England's squad selection was part of the reason why they lost that test?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and you can look at maybe they should have played Stuart Broad or James Anderson, but you also look at Ollie Robinson and Mark Wood. The way they balled was really really sublime, and I think Australia struggled to deal with them at times. And it's the batting and the fielding that let them down in the end. And I think even Chris Fox had a decent game. He wasn't at his best, but uh, yeah, he had a decent game. And you look at Jack Leach. It's a test match in Australia. You have to play a spinner. They misused Leach a little bit, but you have to play a spinner in Test cricket. You cannot just go with a four-man pace attack. It's a completely overcast conditions and green wickets like in New Zealand or England. You have to play a spinner, and I don't think playing Jack Leach was the wrong call. They just misused him. They should have brought him on when Warner and Labuschagne were struggling to get going. Maybe give him a couple of overs to see if he can make an impact. But for they left him out too late, and when he came on, the Australians were just able to go to attack mode straight away.
Look, I think that is 100% right. And I suppose on the flip side for the Australian team, somewhat vindicated. I mean, there was a lot of talk before that first test between would it be Travis Head, would it be Usman Khawaja? They obviously went with Travis Head, and he repaid the faith big time.
Yeah, I was one of the people who wanted Usman Khawaja to be given a chance. I know he has a few flaws in his game, but there aren't as many consistent batsmen as him in in the Australian lineup, I would say, and maybe he'll get a chance down the road replacing Marcus Harris, who doesn't look confident at all whenever he bats for
No.
Australia. So yeah, maybe he'll get a chance somewhere down the line. But yeah, Travis had what an arc counter-attacking innings. Australia were I think 190 something for five when he was on not, and the way he just attacked and made 100 in the session, that's just incredible, and shows what he's capable of. Maybe maybe if he had performed a bit more consistently, like he's been rated highly for so many years now, but he's just lacked that consistency to turn those 30s, 40s into hundreds. And if he can do that in the series, maybe he can be the number five for 3, 4, 5 years to come.
Yeah. I think he obviously took advantage of some very overworked English bowling on the afternoon of the second day. Um, both teams kind of left the Gabba with a few injury questions. Obviously, we saw David Warner not bat in that second innings with a rib concern. We saw Josh Hazlewood be rested somewhat on the third day uh, and bowled limited on the fourth day. And then on the flip side for England, we saw Ben Stokes kind of limping for most of the test match, it has to be said, and didn't get through as many overs as I think that the English team were probably want him to. Do you think it was just down to, I suppose, a bit of being underdone after not really playing much Test match for very long, and obviously hot conditions at the Gabba, or what do you think? Just the perils of Test cricket, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Obviously, Warner's was a blow to the ribs, and that can happen to anyone. Doesn't really have much to do with preparation. But for Stokes, yeah, he hasn't played cricket in so many months, so it's understandable that he would have a few muscle problems. Same with Josh Hazlewood's side strain. He did play in the T20 World Cup, but you only ball 4 overs there, so that's not comparable at all to the rigors of Test cricket. And Australia haven't played Test cricket in what, like 12 months or so.
Yeah.
That's a bit poor scheduling on their part, but in the end, yeah, Hazlewood has paid the price. He's not going to play in the second Test match now, and yeah, an exciting opportunity for Jai Richardson.
Well, I mean, that brings us on nicely to tomorrow's Test match. We both teams. Well, start off with Australia first, shall we? Australia's announced their 11 for tomorrow. First of all, how big a loss is Josh Hazlewood? Because I think arguably he was probably Australia's best bowler without the figures in that first innings, and he's so consistent that it seems to take a lot of the pressure off your likes of Stark, who can be a bit expensive, or Cummins and Nathan Lyon as well. Do we think Jai Richardson coming in can do the same job for that, or do a similar job, or is his kind of role something a bit different coming into this second Test?
Yeah, Josh Hazlewood is irreplaceable, I would say, especially in Test cricket. There aren't uh, any better bowlers than him. Maybe Pat Cummins is on the similar level, but Josh Hazlewood is like one of the top bowlers in the world, and he's also in great form. He was pretty good at in the IPL. He was pretty good in the World Cup. So he's someone who's in great form and great record in the pink ball test. We saw last year how he bowled. He took a lot of wickets in that innings against India when they were dismissed for like 38. So yeah, Hazelwood is a big loss for Australia, and Jai Richardson is a completely different bowler. He's more like a Mitchell Stark to me, and he's someone who can take wickets up front and be that strike bowler. But he's not Josh Hazelwood, and I think he'll have a different role to play. But yeah, he can do it. But again, he's a bit untested at the top level, so it'll be tricky for him. And in Josh Hazelwood's absence, I think Mitchell Stark will have an even more important role to play. He'll have to come up and take the wickets and ball at a tighter length than tighter line and length than he has in recent games. And if he can do that, then Australia will be confident of getting England bundled out for small squad.
There was a bit of talk before the squad was announced that Michael Neser might be in contention. Obviously, has carried the drinks quite a lot for Australia over recent years. Took a fifer in the Australia A versus England Day that was happening alongside the Ashes. He's also quite a decent batting option as well. He's got a couple of first-class centuries to his name on top of a bundle of wickets. How close do you think he was to getting the nod over Jai Richardson?
Yeah, I think he could have been a much more like-for-like option compared to Josh Hazelwood, but with Jai Richardson in such good form, and he's younger, so obviously that's also a factor because the Australians will wanna give someone like him more opportunities because he's someone who's gonna have a future. And obviously he's been pretty unlucky. He's kind of like Andy Bickle in that sense, because kind of unlucky being in the same team as some of the world's greatest bowlers.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Hey.
Yeah, but Yeah, hopefully his chance will arrive, and I think he would have done a really good job, and he would have been a better replacement for Hazlewood than Richardson. But Richardson is a good bowler in his own right, albeit a different type of bowler to Hazlewood. But hopefully he'll do a good job.
And then obviously, uh, the the opening partnership remains unchanged. How much of a risk? Obviously, we don't know Warner's status as far as his ribs go. There was a few rumors floating around that it might have been broken. However, he has passed the fitness test and he is uh, declared himself fit. But that just that for me as an Australian, it feels like a bit of a risk uh, bringing him into the test. I mean, he's been unlucky with injuries in recent years. So, how much of a risk do you see that being?
It's a big risk. I think obviously it's not an injury that can get much worse unless balls hit him again in that
Mm.
area. But we saw Warner play through an injury last year against India, and he would look like a shadow of his former self. So that's something of a risk. If he's not comfortable out there, maybe he'll play a rash shot or just not be at 100%. And with Stuart Broad coming in, there's a backstory as well from the last Ashes.
Yeah.
So he might be tempted to get a big score or go for a big early shot and play a rash shot instead. And on the other end, Marcus Harris is also not the most confident of players. He's out of form. He's never really had a good innings for Australia, I don't think yet. So having someone like David Warner, who is experienced but who is dealing with an potentially dealing with an injury, it's a big risk. And like Mike Hussey said, I think during commentary in the first Test match, that rib injuries can be really painful, and the pain can last for a few weeks. So Warner will,
Mm.
like, hopefully he'll be all right, but it's a big risk on Australia's part.
I also think, I mean, he's probably a world renowned fielder as well. He generally fields in the slips or whatever, so there's going to be some strain there too. I, d- I do have a few question marks over it, especially as we said before, with such a kind of a good backup in Usman Khawaja, who's I mean he's had some ups and downs in his Australian career, but he scored that wonderful century from opener against Pakistan in the UAE a few years ago. So he's very capable and is in good form in the Shield as well. So I wonder if it's all maybe a risk not worth taking.
Yeah, I completely agree. I half expected Usman Khawaja to be in the lineup, but yeah, they've declared Warner fit, so hopefully he'll be fine.
Hmm.
But yeah, if the reports that were coming out yesterday or day before are true, then it's a risk that may not have been worth taking, especially with Australia already 1-0 up.
Yeah, and okay, and I suppose moving on to the other side of the equation, we saw England rest Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, uh, basically in the hope for this pink ball test. I think in hindsight, it probably backfired not selecting one or both of them. But I mean, this is kind of make or break for England. Really, I think this is a almost getting to must win territory for them because if they go 2-0 down, I think the Ashes is all but over for them. Really.
Yeah, I agree. This is a must win, and that's why I'm surprised that they've given Mark Wood a rest for this one.
Mm.
He was their best bowler in Brisbane, so it's a bit weird seeing them go with that rotation policy. It's almost like they're going with pre-planned decisions and not taking into account what has happened, what happened in Brisbane, and what's happened. Like Australia struggled to deal with Mark Wood, so why not just unleash him again in Adelaide, and
Yeah.
then you'll see what
Do we
happens
need?
in Melbourne. Yeah. So
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, the pink ball is massive, and there's been a lot made of it already. Who do you think? Obviously, here's the 12 English players, and
it's a tough one. I would, if it was me who's choosing the lineup, I would probably drop out Ollie Robinson. I think he bowled well
yeah,
in the first game, but he was carrying a bit of a niggle, and in the end, he did not look as comfortable towards the end. And Chris Wokes, I've always thought that he's one of England's most underrated bowlers, and he had he had a few rough moments in the first test, but I think when he's bowling along with Stuart Broad, he is one of the best bowlers in Test cricket, and I think the pink ball would suit him more than it would suit Ollie Robinson. But knowing England and uh, and the way they like treat spinners, I wouldn't be surprised if Jack Leach is the one who drops out.
I personally think that is massive risk. I think, as we've seen in previous pink ball tests, I think obviously the ball does a lot in the early overs of the day, but when that pink ball starts to soften up, and with the pitch in Adelaide, the pitch generally curated quite well. I think there has been some purchase for the spinners, especially later on in the day, as I say, when that pink ball does soften up. Uh, Do we think? Does the selectors and Joe Root think that maybe Joe Root can get through uh, them overs of spin with maybe David Milan kind of helping out for a few overs as well?
Yeah, that's an option, but Joe Root, he's already got so much on his plate, and I would say having a specialist spinner is never a bad idea in a test match. Still have three fast bowlers who can who will be uh, overburdened with and sorry, you always have three fast bowlers, so you don't want to overburden them. And having a spinner is also something that helps the captain, because if you have four fast
Mm.
bowlers, sometimes it can be difficult to decide which order to ball them in, or which who to ball next, or which bowler to pick from. So it can be a bit difficult when picking four fast bowlers. Having a specialist spinner always gives you that extra option to choose from, and someone who can make a difference. And I think Jack Leach, yeah, he got a bit of a rollicking in the first test match, but he's a capable bowler, and if he's given the chance, I think he'd do a really good job in Adelaide.
And the other thing, I suppose, that we haven't neglected to mention from the first test, and it's been a problem for England all year, is the over rate. I think they were at one point during the first test that they were going at 11 overs per hour, which is obviously about 4 overs under the ICC limit. They lost a couple of points in the World Test Championship rankings, and also I think some of the players got fined. If correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong, but I think they
all of the players got 100% of their fees fine, I think.
so there you go. So I mean, having that spin is almost essential for that when you've got uh, these fast bowlers getting through a lot of workload in the Australian heat. I mean, it's somewhat understandable that they're not getting through as many overs as they probably should, and this is where them spinners are really handy to come into, lighten the workload of your likes of Mark Wood or, the older players now, Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson, who are probably not the quickest of between the overs, are they?
Yeah, that's why I think playing a spinner is essential, and the conditions in Australia always give spinners at least something, if not all, if they're
Mm,
not always in the game, but they're in the game most of the time. And we saw how good Ravi Ashwin was last year for India.
yeah.
Obviously, Jack Leach is not the same level, but he's someone that can cause Australia problems. Australia struggle against spin. There's no doubt about it. It's just about bringing him on at the right time, setting him the right fields, and giving him the chance to make an impact, not just a 3 over spell or 2 over spell. Give him an extended
Mhm.
run, and he will make an impact.
And I suppose just on Ben Stokes, we did mention before that he was limping around. Do we think he's going to get through much of a bowling workload, or do you think he's almost strictly there as a batsman for this Test match?
I think he's someone who's their game changer. So yeah, I think he'll bowl at least, but depending on what his fitness levels are. But England really need him, and especially if they play that spinner, I think they'll need him to bowl a few
Yeah.
overs like Cameron Green did in the first Test match. And if he can pull up for like 5-10 overs a day, I think that England would be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, I suppose. We wait with bated breath to see what the final selection is tomorrow. Just, I suppose, a quick prediction on how you see the second Test playing out.
That's an easy one. I think Australia will win this one. They've never lost a ping ball test, and England, they just haven't got what it like. They've got a good squad. They've got a decent squad, and having Jamie Anderson and Stuart Broad in is obviously going to help. But Australia just seem too strong on paper, and they'll be full of confidence after that first Test match.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Thanks for your time, Tushar, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon. Hey.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.